The elevator hummed quietly as it carried me to the 32nd floor of the glass tower in downtown Phoenix. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the desert stretching endlessly toward the mountains, a landscape that reminded me of home, though home was now 1,500 miles and a lifetime away. "Buenos dias, Sofia," called Maria from reception as I walked past. She was one of the few people in our office who understood that my name wasn't Sophie or Soph, as most of my colleagues had taken to calling me. Sofia Elena Ramirez, every syllable deliberate, every letter carrying the weight of 3 generations of hard work and determination. "Good morning, Maria," I replied, switching to English as I always did in the office. Not because I was ashamed of Spanish, but because I'd learned that in corporate America, adaptation was survival. I settled into my cubicle in the marketing department of Pinnacle Financial Services, a mid-sized investment firm that specialized in retirement planning for high-net-worth clients. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was helping wealthy Americans plan their golden years, while my own parents had worked multiple jobs just to send me to college. My accent had been stronger when I first arrived from El Paso 5 years ago, fresh from UT with a marketing degree and dreams bigger than my bank account. 5 years of conscious effort had softened the edges, but it was still there, especially when I was passionate about something, or nervous, or simply tired of monitoring every word. "Morning, team," announced Kevin Morrison, our department director, as he strode through the bullpen with his usual Monday morning energy. At 45, Kevin had the kind of confidence that came from never having to prove he belonged somewhere. His Texas accent was just as pronounced as mine, but his was considered authentic and relatable, while mine was often seen as unprofessional or difficult to understand. "We've got the Hartwell Industries presentation on Thursday," Kevin continued, stopping at my cubicle. "Sophia, I want you to handle the market analysis section. Your research on their sector has been solid." My heart jumped. The Hartwell Industries account was huge, a potential $20 million portfolio that could set our quarterly numbers. More importantly, it was the kind of high-profile presentation that could change careers. "Thank you, Kevin. I won't let you down. I know you won't. Just remember," he lowered his voice slightly, "this is a big client. Make sure your pronunciation is clear. We need them to understand every word." The familiar knot formed in my stomach. Of course. As Kevin walked away, I caught Ashley, my cubicle neighbor, giving me a sympathetic look. Ashley was sweet, a recent graduate from Arizona State with blonde hair and the kind of effortless confidence that came from never having her intelligence questioned because of how she sounded. "That was unnecessary," she whispered once Kevin was out of earshot. "It's fine," I replied, though we both knew it wasn't. I opened my laptop and pulled up the Hartwell research I'd been developing for weeks. The data was comprehensive: market trends, competitive analysis, growth projections, and strategic recommendations that could help them diversify their portfolio for long-term stability. This presentation was my chance to prove that substance mattered more than accent, that brilliant ideas could come in any voice. But first, I had to convince Kevin to let me truly present them. Over the next 2 days, I refined my section until every slide was perfect, every transition seamless, every recommendation backed by irrefutable data. I practiced in front of my bathroom mirror at night, recording myself on my phone to identify moments where my accent became more pronounced. "Market volatility," I repeated, focusing on the R sounds that sometimes rolled more than American ears expected. "Revenue diversification, strategic positioning." The words felt clunky in my mouth when I focused too hard on pronunciation, but I persevered. This presentation could change everything. Wednesday afternoon, Kevin called a final prep meeting. Our team gathered in the small conference room. Kevin, myself, Ashley, and Marcus from financial planning. We ran through our sections, timing our transitions and rehearsing our responses to potential questions. When it was my turn, I stood and began my presentation about market analysis and growth opportunities. I'd practiced it so many times that the words flowed naturally, my passion for the subject overriding my self-consciousness about pronunciation. The data clearly indicates that Hartwell Industries is positioned for significant expansion, particularly in the renewable energy sector, I explained, clicking through slides that illustrated market trends with precision and clarity. However, their current portfolio concentration creates unnecessary risk exposure that we can mitigate through strategic diversification. When I finished, Marcus nodded appreciatively. "Those are really insightful recommendations, Sophia." Kevin, however, looked concerned. "Sophia, you were rushing through some of those technical terms. Remember, the clients need to follow along. Maybe slow down a bit. Really enunciate." "I can adjust the pace," I said, though I hadn't felt like I was rushing. "Good. And maybe practice the pronunciation on some of those industry terms. Diversification, especially. We want to sound professional. The room fell silent. Ashley shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Marcus suddenly found his notes very interesting. I'll practice, I said quietly, feeling heat rise in my cheeks. That night, I stood in my small apartment bathroom, staring at my reflection and repeating words that I'd been pronouncing correctly for years. But now, filtered through Kevin's concerns, every syllable felt wrong. Diversification, diversification, diversification. Each repetition made me feel smaller, as if I was losing pieces of myself with every attempt to sound more American. But this presentation was too important to let pride get in the way. Tomorrow I would speak with perfect clarity, flawless pronunciation, and unshakable confidence. Tomorrow I would prove that my ideas were worth hearing, regardless of how they sounded. What I didn't expect was that the biggest challenge wouldn't be my accent at all. It would be defending my right to have one. Chapter 2. The Weight of Words. Thursday morning arrived with the kind of crisp desert air that made Phoenix bearable in October. I dressed carefully in my best navy suit, the one I'd bought for job interviews 5 years ago, and had worn to every important meeting since. It was professional, conservative, and carefully chosen to avoid any details that might distract from my words. The Hartwell Industries delegation would arrive at 2 p.m. CEO Richard Hartwell, CFO Patricia Chen, and their head of strategic planning, James Bradford. Kevin had spent the morning pacing the office, adjusting and readjusting the conference room setup like a theater director preparing for opening night. Remember, Kevin addressed our team during the noon prep session, this isn't just about the numbers. It's about building trust. They need to feel confident that we understand their business and can communicate effectively with their stakeholders. His eyes lingered on me when he said, "Communicate effectively." The message was clear. I had spent the previous evening practicing my section until my roommate Maria, a nurse who worked night shifts, had gently suggested I might be overthinking it. "Sophia, you present to doctors, administrators, and hospital boards every week," she had said in Spanish, referring to her work. "Some of them barely speak English themselves. Your ideas matter more than your accent." But Maria worked in healthcare, where competence was measured in lives saved, not in how closely you could approximate a Midwestern American accent. At 1:45 p.m., I sat in the main conference room, arranging my printed materials and testing the presentation clicker for the third time. Ashley sat beside me, offering quiet encouragement. "Your section is brilliant," she whispered. "Just remember that." Marcus nodded in agreement. "Those growth projections are going to blow them away." Kevin entered with our guests precisely at 2 p.m. Richard Hartwell was exactly what I'd expected from his LinkedIn profile. Mid-50s, silver hair, the kind of commanding presence that came from decades of boardroom success. Patricia Chen surprised me, younger than I'd anticipated, with sharp eyes that seemed to catalog every detail. James Bradford looked like he'd rather be anywhere else, checking his phone even as Kevin made introductions. "Thank you for accommodating our timeline," Richard said as everyone settled around the conference table. "We're eager to hear your recommendations." Kevin opened with our company overview and strategic approach, his Texas drawl relaxed and confident. When he introduced our team, I felt my heart rate spike. "Sophia Ramirez will be presenting our market analysis and growth recommendations. She's done exceptional research on your industry." "Looking forward to it," Patricia said with a warm smile. Marcus presented first, covering financial planning basics with his typical thoroughness. Ashley followed with client service protocols and communication strategies. Both sections went smoothly, with engaged questions and positive responses from the Hartwell team. Then, it was my turn. I stood, clicked to my first slide, and began the presentation I'd rehearsed dozens of times. "Good afternoon. I'm excited to share our analysis of market opportunities that align with Hartwell Industries' growth objectives. So far, so good." My voice was steady, my pronunciation careful but natural. I clicked to my market overview slide, showing sector growth trends over the past 5 years. The renewable energy sector has demonstrated consistent expansion, with particularly strong performance in solar and wind technologies. However, market volatility requires strategic diversification to minimize risk exposure. I was finding my rhythm now, the data flowing naturally as I explained complex market dynamics with charts and projections I'd crafted meticulously. "Our recommendation focuses on 3 primary areas," I continued, advancing to my strategy framework. "First, diversification across emerging technologies to capture growth while managing risk. Second, geographic expansion into markets with favorable regulatory environments. Third, strategic partnerships that leverage existing capabilities while accessing new revenue streams." Richard leaned forward. clearly engaged. Patricia was taking notes. Even James had put his phone aside. The projected ROI for this diversified approach shows 15 to 20% annual growth over a 5-year timeline, I explained, clicking to my financial projections. Additionally, this strategy positions Hartwell Industries to capitalize on federal incentives for renewable energy investment. I was gaining momentum, my passion for the subject overriding any self-consciousness about pronunciation. This was why I'd gone into marketing, the thrill of presenting solutions that could transform businesses. Questions so far? I asked, pausing before my final recommendation slides. Actually, yes, Richard said. These projections are impressive, but how do you account for regulatory uncertainty in the renewable sector? Perfect. I'd anticipated this question and had data ready. Excellent point, I began, my accent slightly more pronounced now as I shifted into analytical mode. Federal policies have been inconsistent, but state-level initiatives provide more stability. California, Texas, and Arizona have implemented long-term renewable energy mandates that create predictable market conditions. As I explained the regulatory landscape, I noticed Kevin's expression growing tense. He was focused not on my content, but on my pronunciation. The way policies became policies when I was passionate. How initiatives carried just a hint of my El Paso childhood. I finished my response and moved to my final slides, presenting implementation timelines and success metrics. The room was engaged, questions flowing naturally, until I reached my concluding recommendations. In summary, I said, this diversified approach maximizes growth potential while minimizing exposure to market volatility. The renewable energy sector represents not just an investment opportunity, but a strategic positioning for sustainable long-term success. As I clicked to my final slide, Kevin interrupted. Maybe the client needs subtitles to understand, he said with a laugh that was meant to sound casual but landed like a slap. The room went completely silent. I stood there, clicker in hand, feeling as if the floor had disappeared beneath me. Richard, Patricia, and James exchanged glances. Ashley's face had gone pale. Marcus stared at his notepad like it might provide an escape route, but Kevin was still smiling, as if he'd made a harmless joke instead of humiliating his colleague in front of the most important client of the quarter. The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. My face burned with embarrassment, but something deeper was building inside me. Not shame, but a quiet, determined anger. Because in that moment, I realized that Kevin hadn't been listening to my content at all. He'd been waiting for my accent to become pronounced enough to justify his prejudice.